May I ask you a question?
This is a film that I think is just okay. If you want to see some xenomorph action, I'd recommend it, but like with Prometheus, which I'll get to eventually, this is more just fleshing out this universe rather than our characters versus the aliens, which is what I really like to see from this series. The only notable thing is a weird moment where a xenomorph bursts out pretty much fully formed, which I don't think happens anywhere else in the franchise.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. We're seeing.
This is commonly agreed to be the worst of the original Child's Play trilogy, and I definitely agree. It's not a completely awful time, but this is when the Chucky series falls into the identity crisis that you could argue is still a problem with it today. Because this is when the series gets to the point where it can't decide if it wants to be a dark comedy or a somewhat dark and serious slasher. All the one-off characters from this feel like characters you've seen in pretty much every comedy movie, and even Chucky stops feeling like a serial killer in a doll's body and more like a goofy little trickster who just happens to have a murderous side. Yet, there are some good things in this. For starters, I do think they make pretty good use of the military setting, and I also think there are a handful of pretty well done kills, or at least kill sequences. I even think this is probably my favorite Chucky death in the franchise. It kind of makes me wish we had an entire carnival-based movie with Chucky.
Why the hell you dressed like me anyway? I ain't paying you to be Michael Myers. I'm playing Michael Myers.
This movie had potential to be one of my favorites, but the execution was just awful. Finally having a movie that's able to move past the family motivation for Michael, which I'll get to later, to finally turn Michael back into the pure shape of fear from the first movie. But unfortunately, it results in our iconic final girl, Laurie, going out like a random opening kill victim, and the rest of the movie is a borderline comedy with how stupid the rest of it gets. I already said this about Seed of Chucky, but this movie has the same vibe. Feels more like a parody of Halloween than an actual Halloween movie. But like I said, it is nice to finally see Michael going after someone other than his family and seeing him not as restricted in who he's able to attack. So I'd recommend it if you want to see that. This is one I don't have much to say on. This is an extremely mixed bag of a movie. A lot of moments and concepts I really enjoy, but an equal amount of things I just don't like. I will say I think this has some of the best action sequences in the series, in terms of pure spectacle.
I was just patting him.
Normally, I'm the first person to hate on a nearly shot-for-shot remake, but I think this one changes up just enough to mostly escape that criticism from me. Probably the part that holds the movie back the most is the new Freddy actor. It's very hard to live up to Robert Englund, but I understand that they wanted a much more serious Freddy for this movie. For me, I definitely don't end up liking these characters nearly as much as their original versions, but I think this movie overall is just fine. I really remember liking this movie way more the last few times I had watched it, but on my most recent viewing I found it fine, but definitely not as fun as before. Part of it might be how good the recent string of Predator movies have been, but this is definitely one of the weaker films in this series. I do still think this is a movie you'll enjoy if you give yourself up to the dumb action fun. There's a good handful of other Predator films that manage to also give good action while having a much better script.
You let those boys go this instant.
Don't count on it, Verna.
The second time this series, for some reason, decided to try and give a backstory to Leatherface. Although I will admit, it's definitely done better in this one. Honestly, this movie's actually pretty good. Problem is that it's just not a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie until like the last 10 minutes. Overall, not much to say on this one, just a fine movie.
I can see them too. You're just as sane as I am.
Honestly, I'm pretty mixed about this movie. There's just as many things in this that I like as there are things that I dislike. I think the stuff with Umbridge and the Dumbledore's army is a little too upbeat and silly. It's kind of the opposite problem of the third movie, where it kind of goes against how dark the world was supposed to get after Voldemort returned. I do hate comparing things to the book, but Umbridge in the book always felt way more ominous to me. A lot of this again comes from the fact that they were really having to cut out a lot of the book stuff out, especially with this one, since book 5 is the longest book. So most of her downright vile tyranny is put in these montages that make it feel more like I'm watching a Roadrunner versus Coyote short. But I do really love a lot of the stuff in the prophecy room and with the ministry in the last 40 or so minutes of this movie. It's fucking amazing. Okay, so my opinions on this movie have changed quite a bit since I first watched it. I used to absolutely hate this movie, but on my most recent rewatch, I do think I like it now, but there are some parts that I still really hate. It's got the same problem as most animated films nowadays, where they try to bend it to fit modern pop culture. There's a shit ton of pop songs and even a rap number. They even made Snoop Dogg the voice of Cousin It for no reason other than now they're able to put his name on the poster. However, as said, there's a lot I do like now. I like the more comic strip accurate character designs for the Atoms, a lot of the environments look great, and the voice acting is pretty good. But for almost everything I like in this movie, there's something to counter it. I think the designs of all the non-Atoms characters look fucking awful, like to the point I genuinely hate looking at them. And I also think the humor is super inconsistent. It's like every other joke is good and gets a chuckle out of me, but then the joke right after it feels like the most corporate shit I've ever heard. Like I said, I'd still say I like this movie, but it's definitely pushing it a bit.
Maybe I'm scared because I'm meant to.
Not much to say about this one. It's a pretty decent movie, but once again it heavily suffers from the DCEU's lack of patience. At this point in this universe, only 2 of these characters have gotten solo movies, meaning we don't care about this crossover, because we only really know like half of this team.
Walls closing in around me. I made a carefully calculated, highly strategic move.
Another one I really don't have much to say on. It's just fine. There are some funny moments, and I think it had some potential for a follow-up, but overall nothing too special.
If I don't catch him now, who knows how many people he'll free?
You forgot one tiny detail. You're pregnant.
People treat this like the worst movie ever made, but I just think it's fine. Some of the humor is definitely pretty bad, but there was a whole subplot in the first one about Carmen wearing diapers, so it's nothing new for this series. I actually think some of the action in this is decent for a Spy Kids movie, and I think they make pretty good use of the time theme. I also do really like the ending, the villain getting what he wants, but realizing it still didn't satisfy him. But yeah, the majority of this one is just fine, so I think it deserves to go in the 3 stars category.
Change my face to look like you.
Honestly, I feel like this movie kind of overhyped itself by advertising the return of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, because they are barely in it. Also, I kind of realized why this movie felt so familiar to me, because they basically just made a Spy Kids movie with the children of superheroes instead of the children of spies. But honestly, it's not that bad of a Spy Kids knockoff, all things considered. I think all of the kids make good use of their powers and feel like they earn their victory in the end, and I even feel like the mystery and reveal were pretty well handled. But yeah, if you've seen the Spy Kids franchise, you pretty much know all the basic story beats of this one. I really hated this one the first time I watched it, but on my most recent rewatch it was actually fine. Obviously the writers have a bit of a problem considering that pretty much the entire Sawyer family got blown up in the last movie, so it makes sense that this movie is, at least at first, a seemingly complete reboot with a new cannibal family. Except Leatherface has a leg brace from where he got sawed in the first movie, so is this a direct sequel to part 1? Well, that can't be it, because Stretch from the last movie has a cameo in this one. I don't know, it's super confusing, but if I ignore that, this is a fun time. It's such a stupid movie, but it knows how stupid it is most of the time. It honestly pushes the dark comedy a little further than even the second one. Yes, this movie isn't well written, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't at least entertained by most of it. Not much to say on this one once again. This was a decent idea, and the movie starts off really good, but it kind of goes off the rails a little too much for my liking at the end. I still like the movie, but it's just got a little too much going on for my liking. Maybe the most obscure Grinch-related project ever, and I actually think it's pretty decent. Color palette captures those fall vibes perfectly, but unfortunately it is really slow. Like, a majority of this movie is just build up to the scares at the very end, even if the atmosphere is strong throughout. Like I said, the main draw is the trippy visuals at the end, and I think those parts are very strong. I think a lot of people will be disappointed if they expect a lot of Grinch in this movie, since he's not in it all that much. Also, Max leaves him at the end, even though I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a prequel, so I don't know how that works. But I will say, the Grinch himself looks great, probably actually one of my favorite designs for him.
Just go! Go get out! I fucking hate
This movie was initially in the 4-star category, but those last 20 minutes shoot it down to the 3-star category. I thought this movie was really good, aside from some inconsistent characters, but I thought some of the kills were pretty good, even if they're a little over the top for this series, and they managed to do a good job with some of the scares. But it's like in those last 20 minutes, the writers realized they actually had to reveal who the killers were, so they just picked 2 random cast members, and then they also reveal that one of them is still alive off-screen after seemingly being killed and thrown over a boat, and it's treated almost like a joke, like, no, this girl killed a bunch of your friends, you should be afraid that she's still out there. It really feels like the writers just gave up once they got to the climax of this one. This is a fun movie, just not a good Home Alone movie. This was the movie that started the trend of Home Alone just not knowing how to do the Home Alone formula. In the first 2 movies, Kevin was separated from his family by such a wide distance. In this one, his mom is literally just off at work the whole time. Honestly, this one can be a fun time if you ignore the fact that it's called Home Alone for basically no reason.
Hanging down to our knees?
Maybe I'll choke the chicken, purge my snorkel all over them flappy ass tits.
Good, we'll have a good fucking time.
Honestly, I remember hating this movie the first time I watched it, but on rewatch, I actually did kind of enjoy it. The biggest drawback is much more humanized and fleshed out Michael, but if I can forgive how much I hate this version of the character, the movie is enjoyable. This is also basically 2 completely different Halloween movies, shoved into one. One half is a prequel to the original, and one half is a remake of the original, and I definitely think the remake half of this movie is stronger. The movie is also a very overly horny movie, but I'm not going to act like some of the previous Halloween films couldn't be just as sleazy at times. I lived in a very conservative town, and so pretty much no one I knew talked fondly about this movie. And when I finally watched it, I knew why. This is probably the most queer-coded movie I have ever seen from a big horror franchise, which I kind of respect the hell out of, considering this was the mid-80s. I do wish I could say this was a hidden gem of the series, but it's just kind of fine. It's weird because when you take this movie out of the series, the rest of the 80s Nightmare movies are all pretty serialized. The new main lead isn't as likable as Nancy, none of the one-off victims are all that memorable, even the nightmares themselves feel less creative since this is mostly a possession movie. I do think this is one of Freddy's best outings though. This is definitely the most serious the original movies ever taken. It does have a pretty stupid ending, and yeah, so did the first movie, but I'd say that ending kinda helps with the dreamlike feel that the original has, while this one is just a scary cliffhanger for the sake of it. Probably the easiest to skip out of the 80s movies, if not in quality, then how it feels so disconnected from the rest of the 80s films. Another one I don't have much to say on. It has the same problem as the first one, where it's just a completely unrelated movie where they decided to force in connections to the first 2. But thankfully, I think this movie on its own is way better than the second one. It's not a fantastic movie, it's still a bit basic, but I at least remember this one and did enjoy my time with it. Definitely an improvement from all the other Friday the 13th we've talked about. Don't get me wrong, this is not fine art or anything, but this is a way more enjoyable movie than all the other ones we've looked at so far. Not only is the directing way better than most of those other ones, but the story and characters feel way more solid than a lot of the other early Friday the 13ths. It also helps quite a bit that we ditched the slight murder mystery style of the first one and we just get Jason with a bag on his head. Probably the coolest part of the first 6 movies is getting to see the evolution of Jason from scared, physically disfigured child to hulking, hockey mask wearing, machete wielding zombie. And with this one, while he's turned into the hulking monster, he still looks way more normal than later designs. He's missing his hockey mask and that oval-shaped head. And he also mostly uses a pickaxe instead of a machete for some reason in this one. I also mentioned stronger writing. I know it sounds like the bare minimum, but this movie actually has setup and payoff with actual character backstory that's important to how they take down Jason at the end. I'd still recommend like 100 other slasher movies over this one, but if you have to choose from like the first 4 or so films, I guess I'd choose this one. Not much to say for this one. Is this a bad movie? Yes. Is this also a fun movie? I'd also say yes. Probably wouldn't recommend it unless you're a mega fan of DC, but honestly, if you're willing to have a good time, I think you will.
To say.
I wish I'd never been sad at all.
Now who said that? Rudolph?
Another one I don't have much to say on. Just a pretty decent movie. Never really understood the hate for this one specifically. It's not as good as the original, but personally think it's just fun enough that I do enjoy it.
'Cause I've missed you.
This is a much weaker movie than the first one, but it was kinda always going to be. It's pretty widely agreed upon that the adult half of the original It story is the weaker half, so an entire movie that's just that half was kinda doomed to fail. But considering that, I do think they did a pretty good job making this an enjoyable movie.
Fucking stuck, Cole! I'm not even mad, bro!
Yet another one I don't have much to say on. Like I said towards the end of the last video, as we get more towards the middle of this ranking, I kind of lose a lot to say about most of these. It's still a fun time, but it does feel like it's trying a little too hard at times. Also, the babysitter herself is barely in this one, because I guess they could only afford Samara Weaving for like 2 weeks.
Now, Anissa!
Like with the last movie, I suspect that this was a setup for a Halloween Town TV series that also, much like the last movie, never got made. However, I will say I think this one does a better job of standing on its own as a movie. But yeah, stuff like the new actress for the main lead, the new less expensive and less Halloween looking Halloween Town, the new lore they add, the new side characters they add. They even have a cliffhanger ending that I imagine would have set up the story for the TV show. But honestly, this is a decent enough movie on its own. My favorite thing about this series is that the victory from the previous film always ends up having a somewhat negative consequence in the next one. In the first movie, the grandma leaves for the human world, which allows the second movie's villain to rise to power in her absence. In the second movie, they leave the portal between worlds open, and that ends up putting the family's magic at stake in part 3. And now in this movie, the world of Halloween Town is becoming more like the human world, because the human world was being made safer for monsters from the last movie. I feel like this movie gets a bit too much hate. It's definitely not as good as the first AVP, but it's still a decent watch. The Predalien is a great new creation that makes sense for the Xenomorphs, and I think we get some really creepy moments and cool action from it.
A battle will never be fair!
This is one I really don't have much to say on. It's an alright movie, but it kind of just feels like they threw the first MCU Thor movie and the first MCU Captain America movie into a blender.
Creepy.
Unfortunately, this is where I think the series takes a nosedive. From this point onward, I don't think we go back to consistently good Halloween movies until the most recent trilogy. I don't think this movie is that bad, but considering how good the first 4 movies were, in my opinion, it definitely stands out as the least good in the series up to this point. I do still think it manages to be creepy and tense, but the story is pretty weak. First off, the movie completely goes back on that ending of the last movie, which is something that's always gonna piss me off when any movie does it. But then they also randomly make Jamie psychic and add in a random storyline about this thorn tattoo that carries over into the next movie. But as always, the highlight with these early Halloween films is Loomis, who has finally entered full crazy mode. Overall, a fine watch if you're a fan, but not something I'd really watch on its own or if I didn't grow up with it.
Who were John's business associates before he went insane?
Who wasn't the associate type?
This is when I think the cop subplots in Saw get really good. I think the Hoffman reveal feels a little flat since we barely know him so far, but it's not awfully done. Overall, the only major problem I have is the protagonist. His job is literally just to watch everyone else go through traps and do nothing about it. Anja makes it feel like they just couldn't come up with any way to connect all these other games into one. This is also the one where the traps start to go a little too far into the torture porn territory for me. But overall, not a bad movie.
How did you do that?
I simply became one with the tree.
I liked this movie way more as a kid. I still think it's decent, and Balto's relationship with his daughter is still pretty good all these years later, but it feels way too unrealistic for what the first movie was. Like, characters in this are straight up just using magic, and Balto's apparently also psychic now, but overall, still a decent watch. Probably the scariest Predator movie in my opinion. I like how this film continues to develop the species a little bit by having some of them fight each other. Unfortunately, I do think this movie goes a little too far into the blockbuster direction. I know that sounds like a weird complaint, but it's got that kind of Marvel movie feel which is a style I'm never really a fan of outside of superhero movies. But overall, a pretty good action movie if you're a fan of Predator. My least favorite of the original trilogy, and it's mostly because of the companion character this time. She is so goddamn annoying. Say what you want about the son from the fourth movie, but I swear half of this woman's lines are just screaming. The Temple of Doom stuff is really good visually and fun, but it's not that prominent until the end, so it's not that much of a savior. I still think this is a decent movie, but definitely not up to the standards of the two other films from the trilogy. I remember liking this movie a lot more when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I think it's just fine. I think a lot of the setup for the original Alien movie is good, and this is a great looking movie in my opinion. There's just not really that much that interests me personally.
The same thing happens to everything else.
Okay, so this is the movie I legitimately just have like nothing to say on, which makes sense because we are like pretty much right at that little middle area of the list. It's just a decent movie, so I'm just gonna throw it in the 3-star category.
Lock up your children! Yes, Salem, we're back!
A perfect comparison to this movie is Home Alone 2. Both this and that movie do the same basic beats as the original, but whereas Home Alone 2 felt like a step up in scale and even an improvement on some things, this movie is basically just the greatest hits of the original. And it's sad because the strongest parts of it are the few parts that feel completely new, like all the stuff with the young Sandersons at the start. Also, hot take, I actually like One Way or Another from this movie more than I Put a Spell on You from the original. But overall, if you've watched the first movie, you've pretty much seen most of the beats of this one. Also, come on, you couldn't have waited one more year to make it a 30-year gap instead of a 29-year one?
Like Saturday morning cartoons, and dreams one day being bare naked with a girl.
Honestly, for the first film after Burton left, it's surprisingly still pretty fun. Weirdly enough, both this and Batman Returns feel like they take completely different halves from the first one. The first one was a perfect mix of dark and camp. Returns went all in on the darkness, to the point of upsetting many parents who went to see the film, and now this film goes completely in on the campy side. And while I definitely think it's worse than the first two, it's still not a bad movie.
Well, the 60s were fun, but now I'm paying for it.
Another one I really have nothing to say on. It's got some good visuals and decent character beats, but nothing that really interests me personally all that much.
One man couldn't have done this alone.
Like with most Star Wars spin-offs, it's one of those movies that's unnecessary but just fine. Not much to talk about at all with this one, so just throw it into the 3-star category again.
Move. I'm not moving. You want something? Take it. Although the guns are all fake because those wankers wouldn't trust me with the real ones.
What? I think the main problem I have with this one is the inconsistent tone. One moment it's super serious and feels like Tony's lowest moments. The next moment it's a small heartwarming scene with Tony hanging out with this little kid. And then later on you have full comedy stuff with the fake Mandalorian guy. However, I do think this movie has a lot of really good moments that I enjoy, like the final fight at the end. This movie definitely has some especially goofy moments, but I think the good moments make it just enough that I do enjoy it.
Drop it! Buster.
Overall, kind of just an average slasher. I think Maya as the lead actress is the thing that really carries this movie for me, much like with Pearl, which I'll get to eventually.
You need a teacher! I could show you the ways of the Force!
I know that people really hate the sequels, and I'm normally in that same boat, but ignoring the 2 movies that came after this one, I think that The Force Awakens was a pretty promising start to this trilogy. Like, I remember myself and a lot of my friends really liking this movie when it first came out, and while I definitely don't like it as much now, I still think it's a pretty decent movie. It sets up a lot of stuff that goes nowhere, but that's a bit more on the other films for not following through than it is on this one. The movie looks great, it does a lot of awesome and unique stuff that I think is great. It even takes some pretty damn big risks by killing off one of the most popular legacy characters in the first movie of the trilogy. Are still a little too close to A New Hope for me. I still think this is an alright movie.
Oh, about your father? I mean, it's a small town and your mom's a drunk.
I'm just gonna refer to this as Scream 5 because that's what it is. I'm gonna be honest, I really wasn't a fan of Scream 5 when I first watched it. At one point, I would have even called it my least favorite Scream movie, but on rewatches, I grew to enjoy it more and more to the point where I would actually say I do like this movie now. There are just a lot of small problems that I do think add up to massively hold it back. The first one being the characters. Everyone who is not either a returning character, a killer, or one of the 2 main girls is one I completely forget exists as soon as they're not on screen. I also think some of the returning characters are pretty pointless, aside from Dewey. None of the returning characters ever do anything all that important. However, one aspect I think has aged beautifully was the meta commentary. I've heard some people say that the main commentary of this movie is requels, but if you look a little deeper, this movie is clearly more of a commentary on fan culture and how toxic it can be, and I feel like this commentary only gets more and more on point with each passing year. It even kind of works as a slight commentary on how Scream fans themselves reacted to the Scream TV series back when it first came out, how opposed they were to the changes in style and tone.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
A movie that I think doesn't realize its potential fully, unfortunately. They introduce us to this really cool world and then do a thing I really hate in movies, where they immediately spend most of the rest of the movie away from it and have the main character powerless. Instead, because I really do think all the Asgard stuff is probably my favorite part of this movie. The rest of the movie isn't bad, but it feels like a plot you've seen in like a million other movies.
Or perhaps he's wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane.
Definitely not as good as the movie that came before it, but I still think it's a pretty good time. Obviously, as with most Batman movies, the villain's performance is the highlight. I also think you have some pretty good scenes outside of him. But unfortunately, most of it just doesn't do all that much for me.
Stop, get off, man! No! Come on, let me go! Stop it!
This is a mostly fine movie that does have a couple really good moments, but overall, it's probably one of the more forgettable Spider-Man movies for me, so I'll probably just throw it in the 3-star category. Best thing about this movie is how it looks. Tim Burton still knows how to make a movie look amazing, but this movie's plot kind of feels like it has a little too much going on. Pretty much all of the major and minor characters have their own subplot going on. Even Beetlejuice has this subplot about that soul sucker girl, but still a fun enough sequel.
How's it feel to be prom queen's favorite, Christy? Better than sex.
I think this movie is underrated. People talk about it like it completely stomps on the reputation of the original trilogy, but honestly, I think this is a pretty decent movie if you allow it to be. First off, it is objectively hilarious. It takes inspiration from late 80s, early 90s slashers where horror began to really embrace the campiness, and I think this movie captures that feeling pretty well. Lines like, "We've been dating for a month, I know her better than anyone," or stuff like the vice principal carrying the principal's severed arm out on a plate at the end while he gets wheeled off is fucking great. Some of the kills are also decent, which I think helps save it a bit. I also really like the bully girl. I like how they make you feel like she's having an arc and like she's changing for the better, only to rip the rug out from under you. It's a pretty greatly done and devastating twist. Obviously, I do prefer the trilogy, but if they could only get out one standalone film, I think this is pretty fun.
Hey, buddy, what do you think? Maximum occupancy has been reached. Take the steps. Yeah. Stop.
I wish I liked this movie more than I do, And if I were writing this a few years ago, maybe I would. But in a world where every single action movie, especially superhero movies, seem to be trying to copy the formula of this and the previous 5 MCU movies, it kinda makes this one a bit hard to sit through in retrospect. Even ignoring that, there are slight criticisms I have, the first being that only 2 of these heroes really have a personal stake in the fight. Thor being Loki's brother and Steve because of the whole cube thing from his movie. Tony, Bruce, Natasha, and Clint are all kinda just here because Nick Fury asked them to be. Then there's the fact Natasha and Clint haven't had their own solo outings yet, meaning it doesn't feel nearly as satisfying to see them next to the other 4. But overall, I still think this is a decent movie.
The guillotine!
Guillotine? Sounds French. I love the French. Did you know that they invented mayonnaise?
This is the first time since the second Pirates movie where I felt like one of the movies really got what I liked so much about the first one. Salazar is a great villain and I love how he and his crew look especially. My one major complaint with this one is that Jack feels pretty pointless and Barbossa sometimes feels a little out of character. And while those things do get aggravating, I don't think it's enough to fully drag this into being a bad movie for me.
Tonight when we get back to the common room, we'll both have partners. Agreed?
Agreed.
I think this movie managed to bring a lot of that magical feel back into the series after I felt like the previous movie lost a lot of it. I at least think it does it enough that you still feel some of that sting when Voldemort returns. They do manage to make the death of Cedric feel like a truly shocking moment, and Voldemort steals the show as soon as he steps onto set. And while I do think it's a bit silly, making the signature spells of Harry and Voldemort near opposite colors is a great visual that really adds some life into those fights. I also think that the acting here is amazing. You feel the heartbreak when Cedric's father sees his son's body, and listening to Harry cry over his body while the crowd remains oblivious at first. Now, I will say, not everything is perfect. This is when you can really tell they had to start cutting a lot from the book due to how fucking long they were getting, and there are definitely some scenes that feel like they should have been included. Also, I think Ron's little tantrum is obnoxious, and I hate the way he realizes that Harry didn't put his name in the goblet. Oh, well, now that I've seen you compete in this competition we both knew was dangerous beforehand, you definitely couldn't have put your own name in. This is also when the films start to get into the teen drama format that I really hate about some of the later books and movies, but overall, it's not enough to make me hate this movie.
Nice job, kid.
I mentioned earlier how the last movie kind of felt like a generic action movie, and this movie further proves that they had no idea what to do with Steve Rogers without including at least one of the other major MCU characters. In his last movie, they had him working with S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha, Nick Fury, and of course the Winter Soldier himself. And in this movie, they pretty much have the full Avengers-sized cast for most of it. It really feels like after trapping him in the present, they had no idea what to do with him on his own. The movie on its own is fine, but feels a little too overstuffed. Again, it's kind of like Age of Ultron, where it's one of those movies that feels like it's only here to set up other movies. We have both Spider-Man and Black Panther making their first MCU appearances, and all the stuff with Tony's parents. The disagreement over shutting down the Avengers too. This movie pretty much just exists to put all the characters in the places they need to be for Phase 3.
To my room.
Why?
This one might piss some people off. This is a movie I can acknowledge is way better than what I'd rate it, but it really just doesn't do much for me personally. It's pretty good, but I just never ever get that much into it whenever I watch it. It's 3 stars for me, even if I can see why it's a 5-star movie for pretty much everyone else on the planet. There is a lot of stuff in this movie I really like, but most of it just doesn't interest me. All the Star-Lord stuff is great, but everyone else in the movie seems to only be here either for comedic relief or to further support his story. Like I said, that stuff is good enough that I still like the movie, but this is a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, so when only one of the main 5 Guardians has something going on that's interesting, no matter how good that part of the movie is, you did kind of fail. This is when the Nightmare on Elm Street series started to go a little too goofy, but thankfully I don't think it's gone too far yet by this point. I actually really like the idea of the main character slowly gaining her friend's strengths and traits as they get killed off. I just wish they did a little more with it. Probably the worst part about this movie is the ending. By far the lamest way Freddy gets taken out in any of these movies. Apparently we didn't need the combined forces of the Dream Warriors or the power of the Dream Master. This whole thing could have been stopped if Pina had just led Freddy to the bathroom mirror. But overall, if you like the first three, I don't think you'll have a horrible time with this one. Okay, that's finally part 2 done. Took a little longer than I expected, but thankfully the editing process was not nearly as bad this time. I did still have some weird issues with whole sections of the video randomly deleting themselves and then me having to rush to redo them, so if a couple segments of this are pretty sloppy, that's probably why. Also, I just want to mention I noticed a mistake in the last video where I accidentally rated Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie as 1 star when it was actually in a higher category. I accidentally put the wrong amount of star PNGs on the screen, my bad.